I guess I'll get started. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me, first of all? Okay. And hello to everyone online. My name is Renee Bronner Pessin. I'm the daughter of two survivors of the Holocaust, Helen Bronner, also known as Hella, and Sam Bronner, also known as Shulam. I'm here to tell you their story, in part because the history of the Holocaust offers an opportunity
Wow,
to
did
reflect on the
you
moral
get a
responsibility
haircut?
of individuals, societies,
I
and
love
governments.
it. Rafi, I love it.
Here this week in particular because it was
Wait,
International
hold on
Holocaust
a second.
Remembrance Day.
Hold on.
First, a bit about me. I live in
Rafi
Reading
with
with
his
my
new
husband.
haircut.
My three grown kids live in
Hold
Connecticut
on,
and New
I'm
York
getting
City.
Papa.
My daughters and their
Oh,
families
call
live
him back.
here
Tell
in
Danny to
Ridgefield,
call him
and one
back
used to live
on
in
his
Bethel and
phone
is
while
now in
he's got
Southbury.
Papa's
I'm
phone.
lucky because my
Okay?
I'll go to the local
Hi,
school.
Tony.
My
Elliot,
mom is
call you
now
back on his
98.
phone.
And as she can no longer speak for herself, I ask that as she speaks
This
in
is
her
the
video
Holocaust. This
and
is
as
the
I talk
Holocaust thing.
to see if you can picture you and your family and my family's situation during the Holocaust. In the videos, she will tell her story. She recalls her experiences as she was subjected to discrimination, eventually forced labor and imprisonment, first in the ghetto, then concentration camps, followed by DP or displaced person camps. You'll also see my parents' resilience and hopefulness as she and my father rebuilt their lives after the Holocaust. Mom was so traumatized from her experiences that she didn't talk about it for more than 40 years. The Shoah Foundation, in a famous movie that you hopefully all know called Schindler's List, made in 1993, led her to understand that it was important to tell her story. Just these are all pictures of my parents, obviously. That right is a Jewish New Year's card they sent from Rome, Italy, right before they immigrated. Their wedding in 1946 and their 67th anniversary. My dad passed away later that year. My mother was born in 1927, and up until 1939, life was pretty good, as she recalls it to me. She went to school, she played with her friends, saw relatives, normal kid in a normal childhood. Her sister was 5 years older. Her dad was a part owner in a luggage factory, and her mom was a homemaker, as was typical back then. My mom's family was modern, upper middle class, and though they were Jewish, they were not outwardly Jewish. My dad's family was observant and could easily be seen as Jewish, and they were poor. None of this made a difference as to their family's fate. My mom and dad have explained to me that there was occasional anti-Semitism in their hometowns prior to the Nazi invasion. They used to be chased home from work or school. On certain holidays, Jews would be attacked, and they knew to hide. My grandfather, my mom's dad, would close his luggage factory on such days. So you'll note here and on most of the following slides, I have a timeline on top just to give you an idea of when in her life things are happening. In the picture on the left, the blue arrow is my maternal grandmother, her mother, and the yellow arrow is my mother and 9 years old. On the right, my mother is a yellow arrow again, and the blue arrow is her sister, who would have been 17 at the point. It's the only survivor from all those pictures. As you'll hear from her video, the Germans invaded in September 1939, so she was 12. They had heard about Hitler before this happened, but like most people, they didn't believe it would come to their town. She used to tell me that her dad would say, "Why would I leave and where would I go?" From that time on, school was forbidden, so she had no more schooling from the age of 12. And now you'll hear her.
Do you remember how the war came to your town? Tell us about it.
Did you do that, Daniel? Oh. Try again. Okay, it's not working now. I'm glad there's a tech person here. The one before, though.
Bombs, all the bombs falling.
Do you remember how the war came to your town?
Oh, yes.
Tell us about it.
Yes. It was 1939, around September, I think. And we had bombs, all the bombs falling, you know. And we went to the basement, hiding in the basement. And they occupied the city like in a day. We saw German trucks already, and you know, and it didn't take long. We were in the house maybe a week. They started taking us all out, all the Jews in the marketplace, and they were shooting, and all the men had to lay on their bellies. And this was like overnight, and this happened a few times. And then they burned the synagogue, and they were, you know, we had to give up everything that we owned, little by little. And then they put us on the other side of town. They put like 3-4 families in one room. This was like the ghetto already. We realized this was like a ghetto. We were not allowed to go where we wanted to do what we wanted.
Was the ghetto enclosed with wire or?
No wire. We just told you, you're not allowed to get out, you know, from this part, like half of town, you know, and you're not allowed to do whatever you want. We had to wear Jewish stars, armbands, and we couldn't go, we were not allowed to go to school no more, no school. As soon as they came in, no more school. They took away my father's factory, and they took away all our possessions.
So I frequently speak at local schools, and I'm going to ask you the same questions I ask the kids just to give you an idea of what I tell them. I ask them, what if you were picked for persecution because you had blue eyes? How would you feel and how would you react? And what would you expect from others in the way of help or support? And what would your reaction be if your church or synagogue was burned down out of hatred? What she doesn't say is when she went to the ghetto, and you'll hear about it later, she personally had 2 dresses from 1939 to 1945 and some family pictures. And that's all she had for the duration of the Holocaust. These are pictures, primary source pictures from the ghetto in her hometown of Old Kush. I show you the one on the left because you see an old-fashioned stroller in front of a family, and that's all the belongings a family was allowed to take to the ghetto. In the middle is a part of the deportation to the ghetto with the German soldiers watching, and you can see they're wearing the armbands. And this is what they call the document inspection. You can see the men lying on their bellies. And they're going to decide the fate of the people, whether they're going to be deported, allowed to work, murdered. This is the workshop that my mother worked in from the age of 13 to 14. 13 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, no pay. And there was no school. And you can see it's a mix of adults and children. The only good thing that came out of this is that her career after the war, where she was a tailor.
Look at the top left.
Father's family on the left. That's my dad with the yellow arrow. It's hard to see, but they have the Jewish stars sewn into their clothing at this point in time. Of note in this picture too, my Uncle Moshe is missing from that picture. He volunteered to go early to concentration camp in the hopes of saving his family. And my father did the same thing about a year later. But it didn't do anything for his family's fate. Everyone except my dad perished from that picture. In the middle picture is my mother's father with the arrow and his brother next to him. And you can see they're wearing the armbands. And this is my mother while they were living in the ghetto. And you can see the girls are wearing the armbands as well. Although my dad was from a different hometown named Benjamin, you need to know this was obviously going on all through Europe. In the next video, my mom describes an action. which is the German word for action. But in this case, it means the Germans call all the Jews into the town square. And then the Nazis then committed murder, deportations, physical abuse, verbal abuse, as well as separations. And the way the separations work is you lined up in front of the German soldier, and he would tell people to go to one side or the other. And what we know from after the war now is one side was for extermination, and the other side, they felt you were strong enough to work, probably go to a work camp.
'41, '42 was the last time when they took us all to the marketplace, and they put me on one side, took away from my parents and my sister on the other side. And we didn't know what was happening. They were screaming, just crying.
Do you remember how the separation was made? That is, why did they choose you to go to a different place?
We didn't.
No explanation?
No explanation, nothing. And the next day I was sent away, separated completely from my parents.
Were you with a group of young people?
I was the youngest. Me and another friend. She was a year younger. She's needs now. Only those two girls went, we were the two youngest girls.
And where were you sent?
We were sent to another city, Soviet. It was like a big place where they brought people, all the Jews from all the cities. And from there I was sent to camp.
The next thing I asked the kids, my mom explained how their belongings were taken away. If someone told you they were taking all your belongings except what you could fit in a small backpack, what would you take? And then they took away the backpack. Because remember, she was left with 2 dressers and some family pictures till after liberation. She mentions my grandparents and her parents and her sister were sent to the other side. And the only thing we can figure out is that my aunt must have looked frail. She did suffer from severe migraines, and she just must have not looked able to work for reasons we don't know. This is a well-documented day in her hometown. It's called Bloody Wednesday. It was also an action. And it's a day when many people were tortured, killed, hanged, and deported. That is the town rabbi. And the reason I know that, because this picture hangs in Yad Vashem, which is the Israel Holocaust Museum. And I was there with my mother, and we approached that picture, and she said, "Oh my God, that's my rabbi." And then I did some research on it. So he was pulled out of the room in the ghetto where he was staying. You could see he's barefoot. And he was saying prayers over the dead there. We do not know if the people on their bellies are dead or not, but they had killed many people by that time. And he's in his Orthodox prayer paraphernalia. But to me, the thing that stands out the most is the Germans laughing in the background. My research has shown that on March 12, 1942, as part of a different action, 117 Jewish women aged 13 to 28 were deported from Olkush. And we figured out this included my mom. And after that separation, she never saw her family again. She talks a little bit about Sosnovich, which was the first place they took her to before she went to concentration camp. And that was basically a distribution center. They used a soccer field because Benja was a big town. Thousands of people were placed in that soccer field for hours or days on end and then distributed off to the different camps once they decided. The first camp she'll talk about is Markstadt. It's a slave labor camp. And I say slave labor because they were imprisoned against their will, and they, of course, were not paid for their labor.
And Markstadt, I was working fixing clothing, like they used to bring in torn clothes. I used to fix it.
Civilian clothes or army clothes?
Well, no, the civilian, very civilian clothes. Yeah, that's what I was doing in Markstadt. I'm sorry, I skipped Markstadt.
Okay. So you were running a sewing machine?
And sewing machines, yeah, by hand, mostly by hand. And the clothing used to have lights, you know, and we used to have to fix it.
Was this clothing from the other prisoners or from the civilians?
No, not from the civilians, from the other
From the other
people,
prisoners?
yeah, from the other people, and they didn't bathe, you couldn't bathe enough and everything, so they used to have lights, and we used to sit and fix the clothing.
In Markstadt, there was one piece of bread per day and maybe some watery soup. There was even less.
Clothing. And that's where I met my husband. That time my boyfriend, they used to be, it was part was for the women, other part on the other side was for the men. And he worked in the kitchen.
Did you know at that time that one day you were going to marry this boy?
No, I didn't know. Because he wanted to help me and I wouldn't take. I was proud.
He wanted to give you more food?
He wanted to give me food.
And why didn't you let?
And I wouldn't take.
Why?
My mother used to say, if you take from a boy, then you got to marry him. You know,
Uh-oh. It's happening again, Daniel.
Where did you go next?
right?
After Markstadt, where did you go?
After Markstadt, we were separated. It used to be, it was part was for the women, other part on the other side was for the men. And he worked in the kitchen.
Did you know at that time that one day you were going to marry this boy?
No, I didn't know. Because he wanted to help me and I wouldn't take. I was proud.
He wanted to give you more food?
He wanted to give me food.
And why didn't you let?
And I wouldn't take.
Why?
My mother used to say, if you take from a boy, then you got to marry him. I didn't know that I got to marry him later. So I used to walk around hungry and I wouldn't take. But then I got very, very sick. I had pneumonia, water on my lungs, and there was no antibiotic, no medication, and I was really dying. So he brought in food without me knowing even. But I don't know how I survived, but I did.
When you left Markstadt, what was the name of the next place where you went?
Can I say more about Markstadt?
Sure.
Because I found out over there, I saw what my husband, then boyfriend, did. That he was helping so many friends over there. They're giving out food and risking his life. He was so good. Yeah. He was helping so many people and risking his life. I couldn't believe it.
Where did you go next?
Right?
After Markstadt, where did you go?
After Markstadt, we were separated and we were sent away to Peterswalder.
But my dad obviously was lucky to be a cook. He did help save many lives, and I know this from other people, other survivors coming up to me when I was growing up, talking to me about it. If caught, he would have been shot immediately, no questions asked. And the way he did this, there were ration cards, and he would just punch the same hole over and over again to get people extra food. And someone said this to me the other day, and I think it's true, that that was his form of resistance. I never thought about it that way, but I think it really was.
Where did you go next?
Right?
After Markstadt, where did you go?
After Markstadt, we were separated and we were sent away to Peterswalder. That's where I worked in the ammunition factory.
And what country was that in?
Also Germany.
All right. That was also a labor camp or a concentration camp?
Also concentration camp.
Tell us about that camp.
That camp, I worked in an ammunition factory. And
You also lived in the barracks?
Also, of course.
Yes. And how long did you stay there?
Another year and a half.
That took you to approximately 1945, correct?
Yes. Hungry and starved every day.
So the living conditions were more difficult there than in
More
Marshall?
harder even. This is harder than Marshall. I had a friend, they took that piece of bread away from me and made me portions. That's how I survived. Otherwise I would have eaten it up in one time. And she took it away from me and cut it portion and hid it. So I was able to survive.
These are some classic pictures. On the left is a cattle car, and that's what was used for transport of people, of Jews during the Holocaust. It's meant for transporting cows, as the name implies. You can see there's little, if no, ventilation or daylight. They would put a bucket in the middle to go to the bathroom, and there'd be a minimum of 150 people in there at one time, maybe more. And you'd be on there for hours to days, depending where they were transporting you. And many, many people died in these cattle cars. This picture is a kind of a classic picture. It shows the barracks. You could see a typical barracks, that is, 4 levels. They had no mattresses. You were lucky if you had some straw. And you see they're using their food dishes for pillows. And you can obviously see how emaciated the gentleman is. And Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, is in this picture. I like to just talk about definitions a little bit. Holocaust was a systematic state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million European Jews by the Nazi German regime, its allies, and collaborators. It was an evolving process that took place throughout Europe between 1933 and 45. Genocide has a very specific definition. It's defined as the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a specific nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. For the Jews of Germany, in particular, it started with small things such as limiting where Jews could go to work or school, where they could buy things in stores, and then it got increasingly worse over time with organized violence, ghettos, imprisonment, and eventually murder. Hitler came to power in Germany in 1933. And slowly but surely, Hitler and the Nazis began to falsely accuse Jews of causing Germany's social, economic, political, and cultural problems. Some Germans were receptive to these Nazi claims. The Nazis made discrimination against the Jews legal and desirable, and forced expulsion in areas they conquered. The Nazis believed that the world was divided into distinct races and that one race was superior to the others, the Aryan race, which the white Germans were members of. And in this way, the Nazis merged racism and anti-Semitism. To them, Jews were a separate, inferior race, and because of that, religious practice did not matter. The Nazi final solution to the Jewish question was the deliberate and systematic mass murder of European Jews. And it was actually the last stage of the Holocaust that took place from 1941 to 45. I believe the Holocaust took place because individuals, groups, and nations made decisions to act or not to act. And in that time, 6 million Jews were killed, many others injured physically or mentally or both from their harsh imprisonment conditions. And this includes 1.5 million Jewish children. I know these numbers are hard to fathom. Also murdered were 5 million others not talked about as much. This included Roma, who were people descended from northern India, Jehovah's Witnesses, LGBTQ people, disabled people, and any political opponents of the Nazis. Schools around the world have done projects with 6 million objects to try and understand the magnitude of the murder of 6 million Jews. Imagine 6 million paper clips that one class collected. Otherwise, try to imagine piles of clothing from 6 million people or 6 million pairs of shoes. It's hard to imagine the suffering of 6 million people. That's why I'm here telling you this one story, so you can hear about 2 people who went through this. I'm here to bear witness for my family, for those who survived the Holocaust and those who didn't. My parents' story shows the importance of being able to survive the most challenging of obstacles But more urgently, this story shows the importance of recognizing signs of hate and injustice so we could work against it. My goal isn't to make you sad. It's to make you think about and understand what happened so that together as a world community, we can make sure it never happens again. I firmly believe it didn't have to happen. The German people supported or tolerated Nazi policies for many reasons, including personal gain, nationalism, which they felt was love of country, and the unwillingness to protest. Countries, communities, neighborhoods, and individuals made choices, and these choices made history. Now to continue my parents' story. Liberation from the camps occurred in April of 1945 for most people. When the German armies knew they were defeated, in most cases, they abruptly left the camps, and in some cases left inmates who were on death marches out of the camps. Death marches took place because the Germans didn't want the Allies, in my parents' case, Russians and Americans, to see the horrific conditions and the murders in the camps. This is just a map to give you an idea of where in Europe things are taking place. So the purple triangle in Lower Poland is my mom's hometown. Then the brown pentagon right above that is Sosnowiec, where she was taken to the distribution center. And from there, the first camp she went to was the blue triangle way, the blue rectangle way into Germany. That was Markstadt. And then from there, she went to Pettiswalde, which is the red circle up in Poland. You might remember she said that was part of Germany, but that was a conquered part of Poland at the time.
Along with the son?
No, I went with a few friends. That, you know, with a few friends. We met other people on the way, and I went to Olkusz to look. I still didn't know what happened to my parents and my sister. And I found there's nobody around, nothing, no more. And I found out what the war was all about Auschwitz and everything.
How did you find out about Auschwitz?
From other inmates. Then I found people that were in Auschwitz. And I went to Olkusz, and then I met somebody that spoke to my sister and told me about my parents and my sister.
Where did you meet this person?
This person I met in Poland.
In Olkusz?
Well, not in Olkusz, no. In Poland, I don't remember what city I saw.
Well, can I go back a little bit?
Yes, sure.
The Russians released you. Did they give you clothing to wear?
No, I still had those two dresses that I had. And
Were you just free to walk out of the
You were
camp?
just free to walk out and do whatever you want. And we told them that we want to go to Poland and see if my parents are alive. They said, just go ahead. You can.
So the Russian army was at that time occupying Poland, is that correct?
Yes, this part of Poland.
I see.
Right.
Okay.
If that was the end or not, but we'll let that be the end this time. Suddenly, my parents, though still separated, were free. First and foremost, most people went home to search for their families. My mom found that she was the only survivor of her immediate family of 4, an extended family of aunts, uncles, and cousins of 50 people. She was the only survivor. My dad was the only survivor, along with one brother, the one that went earlier to camp, of his family of 6 brothers and many aunts and uncles in Poland. Important to my family story, one aunt had immigrated to the US in the 1920s, which you'll hear about later. Having no one, most people went to DP or displaced person camps, where as a community, there was support to figure out how to start their lives over again after having lost literally everything. You'll note in the next video, my mom calls DP camps kibbutz. That was a Hebrew word for the community collectives that were sprouting up all over Israel at the time. And of note, most people were intending to go to Israel after the war. Now we'll continue my parents' love story.
Yeah, I was not a youngster no more. I was already...
Sorry about the tech difficulties, guys.
Yeah, I was not a youngster no more. I was already 18.
18 years old.
18 years old already.
Tell us about the kibbutz that you went to. What was the name of it?
I don't know. It was Shoah. Already, yeah, I was not a youngster no more. I was already 18.
18 years old.
18 years old already.
Tell us about the kibbutz that you went to. What was the name of it?
I don't know. It was Shoah kibbutz. And I went into kibbutz and thinking I was going to go to Israel.
How did you know about this kibbutz? Who told you about it?
My friend, because she was from Sosnovis, and she heard about the kibbutz. She found her sister, so she went with her sister. I had no other way. I joined that kibbutz to go to Israel.
And how long did you stay there?
Maybe about 6 months. Then somebody knocked on the door. It was the night before I was going to go to Israel, and it was my boyfriend. He looked for me. Somebody told him that I was in Poland. So he also traveled about 2-3 days to find me. And we decided he wanted to go back to Germany, and we got married in Germany.
And where did you go in Germany?
To Weiden. We got married in Weiden.
Why did you choose Weiden?
He had some friends there that went there. Yeah. So we got married.
Who married you? Was there a rabbi there?
Oh yes, there was a rabbi that was in concentration camp with us, and he married us. Yeah, it was still curfew. You couldn't go out the whole night, so it was a whole night wedding. Yeah.
How long did you stay in Weiden?
In Weiden, we stayed by a year.
What my mom doesn't tell you in this video is she was already engaged to someone else when my dad showed up. After the war, when no one had family, people tended to pair off pretty quickly, seeking love and companionship. Then my dad appeared back in the picture while her fiancé was away from camp for a few days. She decided she truly loved my father, and she wrote her fiancé a Dear John letter and left for Weiden, Germany with him. She met this fellow, his name was Wolf, about 40 years later in Florida. And he had gotten married, thank goodness, and had a family, and he forgave her.
Yeah, I was not a youngster, no.
Where did you want to go?
We wanted to go to Israel, so to the Haganah.
Yeah, there's more on that.
Where did you want to go?
We wanted to go to Israel, so to the Haganah helped us to go from Germany through Italy. To Italy we went first.
And how did you go to Italy?
All through the Alps, walking.
Walking? Where did you go in Italy?
Italy stayed in a kibbutz also.
Do you remember the
Private, and then in a kibbutz, and then private. And we met a friend, and he says he was going to the United States. He had an uncle there. So my husband reminded himself that he had an aunt here. And he rode away, and they sent us papers, and we changed our mind, and we went to the United States.
Yeah, so at that time, immediately after World War II, there were immigration quotas. You just couldn't get into the United States. So my dad remembered his aunt's address from his childhood, and rode away, and here we are, because I would have been Israeli otherwise. And there we go. My mom makes it sound like walking through the Alps was a walk in the park. The little people in the bottom of the picture, that's them. She mentioned the Haganah. They were Israeli guides from the soon-to-be Israel who took them through the Alps. Someone asked me the other day how long it took, and I don't know exactly. I just know it took long enough that they had to catch animals and eat them on the way. And this map shows Germany on the top. The Alps is covered, is the red outlined area, and they crossed the Alps into Italy. And their first stop was in Rome. She recently had told me that they stayed in a DP camp there called Cinecittà. And I looked it up, and what's interesting about that is Before the war, that was a movie studio. Then it was a DP camp, and now it's a movie studio again. So when I was in Rome, I tried to get in, and it's an active movie studio, and they say, "Oh, you can't get in." And I tried to explain to them what I wanted to do, and they said, "No way." So after the Holocaust, my parents united to form a family, resulting in a strong, thriving, extended family of now 31 people from 2 survivors. They showed resilience and strength. This, the top document there is an excerpt from the ship's manifest when they came over. Their names are on the right there. The reason I show you this, though, is on the left, their names are, excuse me. On the left, on the right, it shows that they're stateless. The person above them, it shows they're from Italy. And that's the SS Eternia that they came over on. Just to continue the map again, so what Biden is the green diamond. That was where she married my dad, and they were in DP camp together. And then they crossed the Alps down into Italy. First Rome, the black semicircle, and then Naples is where their ship left them.
Helen, would you introduce us to this man?
Yes, this is my husband, Sam Bronner.
And you've been married how long now?
We've been married 50 years. It's coming January 21st. I love him very much and a wonderful life.
And you're going to have a big party to celebrate, I
And
understand.
we have a big celebration. We're all going to Israel to celebrate my daughter's 25th anniversary and my 2 granddaughters' bat mitzvah.
And Sam, what do you have to say about all this?
I'm happy I lived through. I survived and we built a family after the war. And nice.
He says he has nice family, basically. All the trouble with this today. The Nazi family did not complete its mission because in the end, nations rallied to defeat the Nazis. But the important message, in my opinion, is that it took a very long time for this support to galvanize and defeat them. And in that time, 6 million Jews were murdered, including 1.5 million children. Hundreds of thousands of survivors were traumatized, punished, and starved, waiting for the global community to intervene. The world waited long years before deciding to form the Allies made up of Russia or the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and the US, who eventually defeated the Nazis. Down. I guess the one before the last. I know. Keep going. One more. So that's my our extended family now. 31 people. I'll give up. The last slide I have is actually a slide. If you can get to the last slide, Daniel, is a well-known poem by Pastor Martin Niemöller. He's a complicated figure. Initially, he was an anti-Semitic Nazi supporter, even though he was a pastor. His views changed when he was imprisoned in a concentration camp for speaking out against Nazi control of churches. Can you get to the last slide?
And then they
What is
One more. Oh, yeah. Okay, so this I give up. The gist of the poem, first they came for the communists, and then they came for the communists, and I did not say anything. A few other lines. Then they came for the Jews, and I said nothing. And then they came for me, and there's no one left to speak out for me. So I leave you with these thoughts. Will you recognize the signs of injustice, never be complacent, never stay silent, and never forget? And what would you do if faced with discrimination, racism, or Holocaust denial? I'll end my there it is. I'll end my presentation here and ask if there's any questions.